Hello, welcome to this video. Today, as you can probably tell by the title, I am going to be analyzing the show Heated Rivalry. Now, a little bit of context as to who I am and why I'm making this video. First of all, I haven't posted on this channel in years and probably am not going to consistently keep posting. I just really wanted to make a video about this show. And so who am I, right? I, as the title would suggest, am a therapist, and first and foremost, I am a fangirl. And the reason that I titled the video, as I titled it, Fangirl Therapist Analyzes Heated Rivalry, is because I'm a fangirl first and a therapist second. Okay, so let's not get it twisted. I am primarily coming at this from the perspective of someone who is like kind of fanatically insane about something that they really like. The reason that I included therapist is because technically I am a therapist. That is my job, or it is at least the job I am pursuing. I'm like an intern right now, so I'm unpaid, but I'm still technically a therapist. Regardless, you don't need to know all of that. Is it kind of clickbait? Yeah. You know, there's like a trend of therapist reacts to whatever, and so I kind of wanted to hop on that because technically I am a therapist and I can provide what I'm going to do, hopefully, for you in this video, is provide a kind of analysis. This isn't really going to be a review. It's not really a reaction. It's more so like just kind of a collection of thoughts about the show. And I'm trying to approach it, like I said, from both a fan angle, but also like to focus it on the psychology of the characters and like why this show is having the effect that it's having on me and possibly on you and everyone else, because I don't know about you, but it seems like there is this like mass hysteria that has happened. It has seemed to me like I've had this analogy in my mind of it's like a god like shot an arrow onto Earth, and that arrow was heated rivalry, and they were like, this is the thing that's either going to like save or destroy them. It's not really clear what the intention was. I feel like it was like some god of chaos that was just like, they need this right now, because it's really like the effect that it's having. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. Like, I have been obsessed with media before many times, but very rarely has the media that I've been obsessed with ever blown up to this degree. So it's a very exciting time. And I just kind of want to talk about why, you know, speaking from my own experience and also like what I know psychologically. And I'm not going to use any like, you know, I feel like like I said, it's a little bit clickbait, the fact that I'm titling this Therapist Analyzes, because I'm not using any like gate-kept clinical jargon here. I'm just kind of coming at this from like an artistic analysis kind of lens, but like why it's having the effect that it's having and why it's so compelling. Okay, so let me just start by talking a little bit about like how I discovered this show. So I think I was kind of vaguely aware of like the topic of hockey smut romance books, but I thought they were like all straight for some reason. I think there are like some straight hockey smut romances, so that wasn't, you know, my cup of tea. I didn't know that there was gay hockey smut. If I had known, would I have read them? Still probably not. I don't know. I do enjoy a queer romance, a smutty queer romance novel. But like, I probably wouldn't have seen the appeal of the hockey. I'm not a sports person, you know. But then I just kind of heard everybody talking about this show, and they were like, you know, new gay show on HBO. You don't have to say much more to to pique my interest, you know? So I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. Little did I know this would completely change my life. I'm not exaggerating. I feel like I can't, like a completely different person than I was before watching this. You know, and that happens sometimes. Like I said, this isn't my first rodeo into unhinged fandom, but it is just very interesting how, like I said, how widespread this mass hysteria seems to be. So let's get into it a little bit. What I really want to focus on in this video, I have like some notes here, that's why I keep looking down. What I really want to focus on, the kind of thesis statement of this video, if you will, is that I kind of want to counter the narrative a little bit. I've seen a lot of people talk about like, why is this show so popular? Why is it so compelling? And a lot of people are talking, like, have this argument of like, well, yes, it's like sensational because of the sex. That's kind of like what, you know, garnered a lot of attention. It's this show. I guess I should give a little, I mean, I feel like if you're watching this video, you already know what it's about, but like, if you don't, for some reason, Heated Rivalry is a show produced by a Canadian company called Crave, distributed via HBO, based on a book series about two hockey rivals, Shane Hollander and Ilya Rozanov, who they're kind of pitted against each other in their careers, and they develop a secret rendezvous romance hookup long-term situationship kind of situation. And the show gained a lot of sensation because of the intimacy scenes, because it showed very kind of explicit intimacy scenes, that it showed a lot of the like acts of sex themselves, but in a way where it's like, it's still not as like graphic as it could have been, you know, like you only pretty much see ass, you don't see anything else, you know, aside from like their shirtless torsos. But it's still like everything is blocked in a way where you can like tell which sex acts are happening when, and it's explicit in that way. So I think that's kind of like what drew a lot of the sensation to it, and a lot of the conversation around it has been people on one hand arguing that, you know, everyone just wants this show because it's horny and they like the sex. And on the other hand, people who are like defending the artistic merit of it are kind of saying like, well, it's not just about the sex. It's about so much more than the sex. It's about the emotion and the relationship. And I guess I'm here to say I'm making this video primarily in defense of the perverts and the artists, the perverts who are also artists. Because what I'm trying to say here is that it's not that the show is so much more than the sex. The show primarily, like the heart of the show is in the sexual relationship. But what my argument is that the sex itself is not about the sex. The sex itself reveals the characters' psychology, their dynamic, the emotional connection happens through the physical intimacy. And I think that's why it's so compelling. The sex itself isn't about the sex. As we all know, as I know at least, everything is sex except sex, which is power. If you know, you know. Shout out Janelle Monáe. So let's get into that a little bit, right? So basically how I'm gonna structure this video is I want to talk about kind of like the initial setup of their relationship, their initial attraction to each other. And then I'm going to kind of do a deep dive into Shane's psychology, Ilya's psychology, how that affects their relationship and their attachment dynamics, and how that shows up in the intimacy scenes that we see of them in the show. So, strap in. So firstly, also just as a disclaimer, I watched the show before reading the books. I have read Heated Rivalry and The Long Game, but I'm kind of focusing this primarily on the show. In my opinion, the show is like way better than the books, and I might tie in a little bit of book knowledge as just like supplemental material, but this is primarily focused on the canon of the show, if you will. We have the initial setup, right? The first scene that I really kind of want to talk about as to like how their dynamic is set up is the hotel gym scene. So we're introduced to both these characters. They have their first meeting, you know, outside one of their matches. And we're introduced to the idea that they're rivals. I feel like the first scene where there is any kind of attraction really showcased and like sexual tension building is the hotel gym scene. And so what happens is basically both of them can't sleep. Shane starts first. He goes down to the hotel gym, starts riding on a bike. Ilya comes in. They get into this silent competition, right? And so much of their relationship is like unspoken and shown physically. And that also, again, occurs during the sex, but it also occurs during this scene where they are silently competing against each other on these stationary bikes, right? And it's very homoerotic instantly, you know, it's very like they're breathing heavy, it's reminiscent of sex, you know, in a lot of ways. And then they kind of collapse onto the floor. It's very sweaty and like hot. And then what I kind of like about this is that the camera work is kind of like staying in Shane's POV for the most part. And I think in the books, we're in Shane's POV for this part as well. And basically the camera is like showing you what Shane is focusing on. And so it kind of like pans down to like Ilya's crotch, pans back up to like his mouth. Like there's a lot of like suggestive camera work happening. And we're meant to clock this as Shane is like checking Ilya out. He's registering an attraction, right? And this immediately feels charged because we already kind of have a sense of who these characters are, right? So Shane is this kind of like very polite Canadian, perfect seeming, hyper controlled good guy, right? He seems kind of boring from the outside, but he's very like put together in a way. Like he's very like trying to present himself as this like perfect humble hockey player. And Ilya we kind of see as this, you know, our first image of him is him smoking a cigarette. And their first interaction is Shane, you know, telling him, you can't smoke here. So we already kind of get this idea, like, Shane is a rule follower. Ilya is like a bad boy, rebel, Russian, you know. I think their cultural backgrounds are also important. You know, Canada has this kind of stereotype of being very polite. And I think Russia is seen as kind of being, you know, a little bit more abrasive. And so we kind of have this like stereotypical idea of who they are, right? And so we also kind of get a sense that Shane, if he does know that he is gay at this moment, it is probably not something that he is very comfortable with, that he is like out with or about. And so there's automatically a sense of charge in Shane's acknowledgement of his attraction to Ilya. And we know from the books that Shane at this point doesn't know that he's gay. And this is the first time that he's really felt this kind of like intense attraction to another man. And so it's kind of like a big deal, right? And so I think that kind of is coming across in the acting and the camera work to show like why this attraction for Shane is immediately charged, is immediately, you know, has a weight to it. Like it means something. It's not just like a little thing that he can brush off. And this, I think this scene also kind of sets up their dynamic with each other, because Ilya is kind of clocking Shane's attraction to him, and he even like gives him like a little wink, you know, like there's a kind of like flirtatious wink that he does after he passes the water bottle. And this will then lead into the dynamic that continues in their first intimacy scene, where Ilya is the one who is kind of noticing something about Shane that Shane is uncomfortable with or embarrassed about, and he's like confronting it and not running from it, and it forces Shane to confront it and not run from it, and that creates a very interesting dynamic. So I'm going to pause here and then go into Shane's psychology a little bit, and how that plays out in this dynamic. Okay, so let's get into the psychology of Shane Hollander. So, who is Shane? Shane is an NHL, well, it's in the, what did they change it to in the show? MLH, Major League Hockey player. He is half Japanese. He is implied and confirmed by the author to be autistic. And we get the sense that he is very hyper-controlled, perfection-driven, has a lot of anxiety, is very particular about the way that he likes things. We also get the sense that his family is like a hockey family. Like his mother is like his manager. And so he has very high expectations from his parents to perform well, and that basically creates kind of a psychology of him where he is like over identifies himself as being this like perfect good guy, stable, hockey focused, and also I think a lot of that with the hockey itself is this culture of masculinity that he tries to hold himself to. I think Shane at his core is a very sensitive, gentle person, but that kind of sensitivity is not really welcomed in the culture of hockey. And so I think he kind of represses that. He represses a lot. He's a very repressed man, okay? I think he represses his emotions. He's not very comfortable showing his emotions with others. And he also represses his sexuality, right? In the books, we know that he doesn't even think that he's gay until well into his relationship with Ilya. And his kind of like core psychology, I think, like the core thing that he is afraid of, and we'll get into this again when I talk about Ilya and Shane's like attachment styles. I think Shane comes from a family dynamic, right? Which I feel like this is kind of under talked about a bit. I see a lot of people talking about like Ilya's trauma and how his family, you know, is like very tragic and messed up, but like I feel like people are a little too quick to assume that Shane has a super healthy family dynamic going on. I do not think that is the case. I know we all love Yuna. She's a great character. They have a great scene together in episode 6, but I do think that woman caused that man some trauma. I do. I do think that, and not just her, probably maybe his dad too, I don't know. And it, you know, and I'm not trying to like place blame, you know, these are characters, it's not that serious anyway, but I think part of this is also like the cultural element, right? Like his mother is Japanese. There's probably a certain pressure that she feels to, you know, like the American dream, to like live up to, you know, a certain standard because of the extra, you know, pressure that is put on her. and her family because of their like status as an interracial family, and because we even see that a little bit, you know, in some comments that are like made, like at the draft. I think somebody makes a comment about like, you know, it's like very subtle, but it's like, you know, implied that there's like, you know, something kind of like exotic about Shane being half Asian. And so there's like these kind of cultural dynamics, and I think that there is a emotional environment where emotions are not really fully welcomed. So I would say Shane likely comes from a background of emotional neglect, which is a type of trauma, and that kind of creates this fear in him that if he were to be fully who he is, if he were to fully know himself, the thing with Shane is that he is primarily afraid of knowing, figuring something out about himself, discovering something about himself that would threaten his acceptance to other people, right? I think he avoids knowing things about himself because he knows that he's not a good liar, and once he discovers something about himself, if he accepts that he's gay, now he has to hide that he's gay, you know? And so I think there's like an avoidance of him actually acknowledging and knowing what it is he really wants and who he really is. And so because of that plays into his relationship with Ilya, and especially in the sexual initiation that happens, right? So we really see this play out in the very first intimacy scene. So it starts with the shower scene, right? And we see that Shane is checking Ilya out. Okay. Ilya notices that Shane is checking him out. And the thing that Ilya does that I don't think anyone has done for Shane before is he doesn't skirt around Shane's vulnerability. He doesn't skirt around Shane's discomfort. He confronts it directly. And I don't think anyone in Shane's life has done that. Shane is someone, like I said, he is very sensitive, and he does try to repress his emotions. I don't think he represses it as like well as he, like, I don't think he hides his emotions as well as he thinks that he does. But I think that everyone else in his life just doesn't question it. Like they might see that he's feeling something that he's not saying, but they're not going to push it. You know, maybe that's a Canadian thing. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's just like how, you know, the people around him function. They're just like, okay, I'm just going to leave you to you. But Ilya doesn't do that. Ilya, when he notices that Shane is feeling something uncomfortable, he pushes further. And you can see this in the shower scene, right? Ilya's noticing that Shane is attracted to him, and he even like glances down, and it's like, this is only kind of implied in the show. In the books, I think at this point, it's like, I believe we're still in Shane's POV, and like Shane becomes visibly aroused looking at Ilya, and Ilya, like when he does the like eyebrow raise nod, it's like pointing that out. And so, right, so Shane is in a moment of vulnerability, moment of embarrassment and discomfort, and Ilya, being the kind of asshole that he is, doesn't do the polite Canadian thing, which would just be to ignore it, pretend it doesn't happen. He, he confronts it, he acknowledges it, he raises an eyebrow, which could be initially perceived as like he's being an asshole, he's trying to like kind of, tease me about it, or even worse, like, he could be seeing it as like some kind of like come on or threat, like it's a potentially dangerous situation for Shane. He doesn't know how Ilya is going to respond to this, right? And so Shane initially says, fuck off, when Ilya acknowledges with, again, his eyes, the nod, the body language, that he sees that Shane is attracted to him. He says, fuck off. And again, if Ilya was a, you know, polite person who, you know, wasn't going to push Shane's boundaries, he would fuck off. But is that what he does? No. What does he do instead? He fully faces Shane and takes it a step further, right? Now he's stroking himself. Now he's like looking Shane in the eye, inviting, right? And this is like kind of what creates this very interesting dynamic within Shane, because since Shane is such a repressed person, right? His desires are repressed. His sensitivity is repressed. Repression often comes out in sexual desire. And Shane secretly wants somebody to push on those weak points of his. He wants somebody to push his boundaries a little bit, but he just doesn't know that that's what he wants. And so Ilya is doing that, right? He's confronting the vulnerability that Shane is feeling in the moment. And Shane, instead of, you know, committing to his fuck off, what does he say? He says, not here, which means that he's interested, but just not here, right? So there's something about Ilya kind of provoking him in this way that like bypasses Shane's defenses and forces him to confront the reality of what he wants. And I think that that is what makes it so intoxicating, especially like that scene progresses, you know, into the first intimacy scene. And I love that we get to see like Shane freaking out beforehand. He's like, and in the books, this part is really funny too, because it's, you know, he's like overthinking to the max. He like puts on a suit for a second, which is so funny because it's like, dude, you're about to hook up. Why are you putting on a suit? You know, like, and he's like turning on the TV, turning it off. He's like trying to look cool. You know, it's really cute and endearing, but you can tell that he's panicking because his brain doesn't know what the fuck is going on. His body just agreed to something that his brain did not agree to, but he agreed to it. And so he's like, what the fuck is going on? And so, but he's doing it, right? Because there's something that is pulling him to do it. And then when Ilya shows up, right, Ilya continues to be the forward initiator here. Shane first is like, do you want to talk? And Ilya's like, no, like, that's not why the fuck I came up here, you know? The thing with Ilya, he never lets Shane take the easy way out. He's always like, no, I didn't come up here to fucking talk. That's not what we're doing. So he starts kissing him, right? They get up against the wall. And then you can see, the acting is so incredible also, because like you can kind of see like the war that's being waged in Shane's head, because he's anxious about this. He doesn't know what this means. He's never done this with a man before. And so he's like freaking out, but you can see how Ilya's presence, how Ilya's insistence, right, is like bringing out this desire in him. And you can kind of see the moment that he like surrenders to it. And it's just like very beautiful. Like, it's hot, but it's also really beautiful. Like, I guess this is kind of goes into the thesis of what I'm saying. Like, why is that so hot? Why is it so sexy, you know? To see a character like surrender in this way, it's because like we see what that means for them emotionally, right? He's kept like all of this walled up for so long, and then now it's like the dam is like breaking, you know? It's like almost like he can't really stop himself, and he just like, he's instantly like in it, you know? Like you can see the moment that he just like, his mind is gone. Now he's fucking sucking Ilya's thumb. He goes down to his knees. Like it's very like instant. And then, like, you can see moments where he's, like, brought out of it again. But there's always something that brings him back, where he's like, you know, there's a moment of, I think, anxiety or nervousness when they transition to being on the bed, and then Ilya's like, what do you want to do? And Shayna's like, I don't know. But then, like, they get into it again, and then it's like it clicks on again. You know, that part of him that knows what he wants comes online when he's with Ilya, and then he's like, oh, I know what I want, and he does it. And it's just like, again, it's beautiful. I think it's hot, but it's also beautiful. It's hot because it's beautiful, because we understand intuitively, emotionally, what that means, right? And I think that kind of is like what creates their kind of subtle, like, dom sub dynamic, which I'll get into how that is on Ilya's side in a moment. But I think for Shane, and especially for any of us who can, like, relate, you know, any of us who grew up, I mean, I grew up queer, you know, in a conservative area in Texas. So, like, I, you know what it's like to keep my, you know, sexuality repressed, to keep my desires repressed. Anyone who can kind of relate to that, to relate to suppressing any kind of longing, feels this, like, catharsis and this, like, liberation, I think, vicariously through watching Shane give in to this desire. And I think that's why it's instantly so compelling. So now I want to talk a little bit about Ilya and why this is also super compelling for him and his character. So Ilya Rozanov is the rival hockey player, right? Shane plays for Montreal, Ilya plays for Boston. Ilya is an immigrant from Russia. He, we know, has a very abrasive, controlling, likely emotionally and verbally abusive father. His family dynamic is rough. Okay, we get the sense that there is a lot of animosity towards him. He has a brother who hates him. We don't really know exactly why. There could be multiple reasons for that. But he's basically the primary breadwinner of his family, right? He goes to America to play hockey, sends his family money. We also know that his father has dementia, and his brother is the one who has to take care of him. And we also know that his mother died at 12. We find out in episode 6. His mother died at 12 of suicide, which he was then told, he found her after she had taken a bottle of pills, and he was then told by his father that it was an accident. So he was then gaslit, essentially, into this narrative that his mother died by accident, but he knows the truth, which is that she died by suicide. And so he has, you know, some significant trauma from that. But we also know, in terms of his, like, attachment, is that he really loved his mother. He had a very positive, loving relationship with his mother. So what that kind of creates in terms of his relationship to love and to vulnerability, right, is he knows what love feels like. He knows what a genuine connection feels like from his mother. But he believes that kind of love, that kind of connection, can be taken away at any moment. There's also likely some sense of guilt that he feels. Like, his mother, I mean, suicide is difficult for you know, anyone to process if their loved one died by suicide, because then it's like you question, you know, like, was I not enough? Was I not a good enough reason to keep them around? And he sees, you know, he saw how verbally abusive his father was to his mother. There could be some blame of, like, I didn't stand up for her enough, you know? So there could be some self-blame, some guilt, some feelings of, I wasn't enough, right? I wasn't enough. And this connection, this love that I have, was taken away. So he has learned that love is fragile. It can be taken away at any moment. And also, that it's not enough, that he's not enough. And he also has kind of internalized being a disappointment in his family. His father sees him as a disappointment. And so because of that, right, contrasting to Shane, where Shane is like kind of the golden boy of his family and is trying to, you know, live up to all these expectations, I think Ilya kind of copes through becoming a rebel, right? Kind of leaning into this like rebel bad boy persona as a form of empowerment. And I think what's also really interesting is the difference between how Shane and Ilya, their relationship to their own sexualities. So Ilya is bisexual, and now, objectively speaking, you might think that since he's in Russia, where being queer is criminalized, he would be the one with more shame about his sexuality, but that's not the case. And I think that that's interesting. And I think it has to do with his, he's kind of detached from his culture in a way where he like, he hasn't really internalized like a lot of the messages of the culture that he's in. He kind of leans into this rebel identity of like, they're never, you know, I'm never going to be good enough for them, so I just have to, you know, like, accept that I'm just this, like, rebel, bad boy kind of person. And I think the bisexuality aspect of it is also interesting. I think if he was fully gay, it would probably be a slightly different story. Because since he is still attracted to women, there is, like, a safety in that, where he can still envision a future for himself where he gets married to a woman, right? And so his attraction to men can just kind of be seen as, like, something else that, you know, makes him rebellious, that kind of elevates him, you know, in his mind above, like, the, you know, whatever outdated expectations of his culture he doesn't want to subscribe to. He also uses humor and his kind of asshole nature, his kind of like teasing and abrasive sometimes kind of way of speaking as armor, right? As emotional armor. And I think what creates Ilya's attraction to Shane is that I think Ilya longs for intimacy, for sincerity, for vulnerability, but he doesn't feel like he can initiate it. He doesn't feel like it's safe to initiate it, especially if there's not proof that the other person feels the same way. And so that leads to a very interesting dynamic with Shane. I think Ilya is charmed, extremely charmed by Shane's earnestness, right? And we can even see this in their first meeting. Like, Shane shakes his hand twice, you know, which is like kind of strange. And I think that there's a moment in that interaction where the second time Shane goes to shake his hand, you know, if Ilya truly was this like asshole, doesn't care, you know, like arrogant prick, he would probably like not shake his hand again, or he would make some like snarky comment or something. But he sees Shane reach out, and you can kind of see on his face that he's like a little bit amused by it, but he shakes his hand again, right? And I think it's because he finds it charming. He finds it refreshing that Shane is so earnest, so seemingly, you know, sincere. And I think he's intrigued by that. And I think he can also sense that there's like something beneath the surface in Shane, you know, because I think he also has this like envy to Shane for Shane, since Shane is, you know, he even calls him, you know, oh, Mr. Perfect, you know, when he sees Shane like speaking perfect French, you know. So he's kind of envious that Shane is able to have this like perfect good guy kind of persona but I think he's really, really curious about like what could be underneath that. And I think that's what creates the kind of initial attraction for him. And what I really want to talk about is like, it creates this dynamic that I like have been calling the poking the clam kind of dynamic. And what I mean by this, I don't even know if this is like the best analogy for this. If there's a better one and you can think of it, let me know. But like, this is what I was thinking of it as. It's like this dynamic where he tries to provoke something vulnerable out of Shane, but not with the intention to be cruel or to make fun of Shane. It's so that when he gets there, when he like gets the confirmation of the vulnerable truth that Shane is like, you know, afraid to admit, once he gets him to admit that, he then like caretakes it. He then responds by matching the vulnerability. And it's very interesting. And so I want to give some examples of this, right? I think we can see it right away, really, even in the shower scene. You know, with him, again, like raising an eyebrow at Shane being attracted to him in a seemingly kind of, you know, like could be asshole-ish kind of way. Again, he's not doing the polite thing. He's not turning away. He's like confronting it. Like, oh yeah, is that how you feel? You know? And his continuing to like confront it even after Shane says fuck off, right? He's noticing that this is something that Shane is feeling towards me. This is something that Shane is embarrassed about feeling, but he doesn't do the polite thing and turns away. He keeps pushing because he wants to see Shane admit to what he wants. And once he gets that, he gets the reward of Shane saying, not here. He's like, okay, I'm right. Like, Shane wants this. And that's like rewarding for him, I think, because it's like proof that, that Shane has something, you know, more interesting going on than like the facade that he projects. But I think it's also like it's inviting for him because he knows that if he can get Shane to that place of vulnerability, that then he can be vulnerable himself. And so then that progresses when they're like in the locker room, and then Shane is like, we can just forget that happened. And then Ilya's like, is that what you want? Like, he's not letting Shane take the easy way out. He's like continues to kind of provoke him a little bit, you know, until he gets Shane to admit what he actually wants. And so then he's like, you know, if I knock on your door at 9 o'clock, Shane's like, I might answer, you know? And the thing is, like, again, Ilya's not doing this with a cruel intention, right? He's not playing a trick on him. He really wants to hook up with him. He wants the same thing that Shane wants. He just kind of like gets a kick out of seeing Shane admit to it, I think. And I think we can see that progress in terms of like their vulnerability. I think you can also, even actually in that first hookup scene where, after Shane goes down on Ilya has this moment where he kind of jokingly is like, all right, that was fun. And he kind of like gets up like he's about to leave. And I think he also like, he knows that Shane is going to take everything very literally. And I think that's also fun for him. And so Shane is like, are you serious? Like, what the fuck? And then he's kind of doing this like asshole dickish behavior as a kind of like teasing thing, but he's doing it because he wants Shane, he wants to see the vulnerability in Shane. So then when he comes back and he's like, I would not leave you like that. And then Shane is like, no. And the way he says no, like questioning, like a no, you wouldn't leave me like that. It's like, it's a very vulnerable way that he says it. And I think that that's kind of like what Ilya was wanting, because he does it, he responds, you know, in a very like tender kind of way, you know. He's like, no, I wouldn't leave you like that, you know. It's like, and I think that that's like, that's what he's wanting. He's wanting the permission to be sincere, but he needs to push Shane to a point of vulnerability before he can do that. So you know, others examples of that, like I think that influences the moments that are more kind of like dom sub. Like I think the Vegas scene, both the bathroom scene and the hotel room scene in Vegas, can be examples of that. I think that whole part is kind of like Ilya wanting proof that Shane like still wants him. Ilya at that point has been probably feeling a lot of like self-hatred because of his father, because of the way that his family has been treating him. And he like has this belief that he's, you know, he's not enough. He's going to be a disappointment to people. He's going to let people down. And he probably, again, like wants the proof that he has this effect on Shane, that Shane is still like desiring him to this degree. And so that, you know, is what is creating those like really intense scenes where Ilya's telling him what to do, you know. And he likes that he has, I mean, I think he likes that he has that power, first of all, that because he feels kind of like out of control in his own life. So it's like refreshing to him to have the power. But I think it's more so the like relief of knowing that he is like still wanted, and that like he can pull out this vulnerable, like needy kind of sincere side of Shane that like gives him the permission and the relief to then go after what he needs. And I think the most obvious example of that is in episode 6, this is a conversation they have that's not necessarily part of an intimacy scene, but it's more of an emotional intimacy scene, when we have I have this problem conversation, right? So this is when Ilya, again, he's doing this thing. He's like provoking Shane's weak spots, his vulnerabilities. He wants proof that Shane would be jealous. So he starts by saying, like, I could marry Svetlana for citizenship, right? And he starts, you know, going off on this whole tirade about it. And you can see Shane reacting, right? You can see Shane getting visibly upset. And Ilya is doing this because he's wanting to express to Shane how he feels about him, but he can't do it, or he doesn't feel comfortable doing it until he knows that Shane feels the same way. He wants to see it. So when Shane reacts, you know, in a way where he's jealous, he's hurt by the thought of Ilya marrying someone else, that's when he can respond to the vulnerability that Shane is presenting with the vulnerability of his own. And that's when he says, you know, I have this problem. All these women everywhere, you know, they all love me, but I can't stop thinking about this slow fucking hockey player with beautiful freckles and a weak backhand. And like, you know, he adds these details so that Shane knows that it's him that he's talking about. And then he like doubles down on the like sincerity of it when Shane says, do you want that problem to go away? He's like pure, earnest, sincere, vulnerable when he says, no, I don't ever want that problem to ever go away. And it's like, it's just so, oh my God. It gets me so worked up, because it's like, it's just so beautiful. Again, like with Shane, you see him submitting to his desire, and with Ilya, he kind of like finds these roundabout ways to do the same thing, essentially, to like allow himself to be vulnerable in the way that he wants to be. And so like when he gets it, when they both are able to finally meet each other in this place of vulnerability, it's just like it's very beautiful. Next, I want to talk a bit about their attachment styles and how this plays into their relationship with each other. So just as a disclaimer, like, I don't like to subscribe to like concretely to like attachment style boxes. I think it can be kind of reductive, but for the purpose of this video, I think I would classify both of them as fearful avoidant, but for slightly different reasons. So I think that so both of them essentially want connection but are afraid of it at the same time. And I think that Shane, his core fear is that he will discover something about himself that will lead to rejection. So he fears rejection and the shame of something about himself. Ilya, I think, more so fears abandonment and fears that he won't be enough for someone. And it might seem like those are kind of the same thing, but they play out in slightly different ways, right? And kind of as I was talking about before with like Shane kind of having this background of emotional neglect, right? He might not really know fully what it feels like to be in a completely, to be in a space of full authenticity and intimacy and vulnerability with someone. And so that is inherently kind of threatening to him. And he's learned that he has to present himself and perfect himself in such a way in order to keep, his connection, not only to his family, but like to his career and his peers. And so, for him, fully being vulnerable and honest about who he is and what he wants is potentially threatening, right? Whereas Ilya knows who he is for the most part. Like, Ilya knows who he is and for the most part knows what he wants. It's not so much that he's afraid of discovering something about himself that will lead to rejection. But Ilya has learned that where he knows what love and intimacy and connection feels like from his mother, he also knows that it doesn't last, that it can be taken away at any moment, and that he could not be enough for somebody. He could be the reason why they go away, right? And so that leads both of them to, at times, be the one pursuing. It leaves this like push-pull dynamic where at times one of them is pursuing more connection with the other and the other is avoiding and pulling away. And we kind of see this flip-flop, right? So it starts, I would say, kind of in episode 2, after Shane has kind of had time, right? So episode 1, Shane is still wrapping his head around the idea that he's attracted to Ilya. And I think once he has time to kind of process and accept that, right? Because again, his fear is like learning something about himself that is threatening. Once he's able to be like, okay, I've accepted this about myself. It doesn't have to change anything as long as we keep it a secret. It doesn't have to threaten my relationship with anybody else, as long as, as long as it's a secret, as long as we can just like keep it, just keep it between us. He gets a little bit more comfortable, right? And so I think in episode 2, after they have penetrative sex for the first time, Shane is brought into this kind of very, gentle, tender energy, and again, I think this is part of just like who he is. Like I said, he's a very gentle, sensitive person. And I think the sex is something, again, that brings both of them, I think, like closer to their essence, closer to who they truly are. And so I think, you know, that first time being so profound for him, he's just, you know, blissed out. And he starts kind of caressing Ilya and like kisses his forehead. And Ilya, I think in that moment, is starting to realize like, oh, this is getting kind of too real, you know? And so Ilya is the one who is now realizing he's feeling this feeling. I mean, we don't know to what extent he's like labeling it, but at some level he's registering that this feels very intimate. And he's the one who's like, I should go, right? And then Ilya kind of avoids Shane for the rest of episode 2. He avoids him at the Olympics. This is also exacerbated by the family dynamics he has going on at the time, because he's internalizing that he's a disappointment, you know, that he's going to let people down, he's not enough, which is, again, kind of what leads into the Vegas scene of him wanting proof that Shane, you know, wants him. But we see the kind of attachment flip-flop in episode 4, where it's then Shane the one who freaks out. And I want to talk about that scene a little bit more, because this kind of goes into my next and hopefully last point, because this video is too long, which is that sex for them functions as this like truth-telling space, because whereas they can lie to themselves in their minds and they can lie to each other about what they feel, their bodies cannot lie. And I just think this is, again, why the sex is so compelling. It's because it's like, y'all are saying that, like, this doesn't mean anything, but that's not how you're interacting when you're in the bedroom. Like, you're not interacting like a casual hookup. Like, at no point do they ever have sex in a way that looks or feels or sounds casual, you know? And it's very, like, entertaining to kind of watch that as a viewer, because you're like, you can, again, feel the emotion that they're feeling. You can feel like how intense and intimate it is. And you can sense the dissonance between them feeling that and knowing that on some level, and then like rejecting that, you know, to themselves. So I want to talk about the couch scene in episode 4. Okay, so this is after this is the first time Shane is at Ilya's apartment. They have sex, and then Ilya convinces Shane to stay for the first time, and then he like starts acting very domestic, right? Like, he makes him a tuna melt. They're talking, they're having like conversation, which is something they haven't really had much of, you know. They're just like, they're acting very like domestic with each other. And this is all, you know, new to Shane. This is changing the dynamic a bit. And again, his brain hasn't had time. Anytime there's a change that his brain doesn't have time to catch up with, it's overwhelming for him. So this is kind of overwhelming for him, right? And so then they're sitting on the couch, they're like cuddling. And this moment is so beautiful to me, because it's like, you can see that Shane, once again, he's like a victim to his own desire, you know. He's like overcome with this emotion, with this feeling of like tenderness that's happening between them. And he starts kissing Ilya in a very romantic way. You know, this is not like, let's start fucking right now. It's like, he is like leaving very slow like kisses down his body. He's like giving caresses. Like, it's very like romantic, very soft, very tender. And again, it's like, you can see that it's like almost coming from like a part of himself he can't control. He can't lie to himself about what he wants. When he like when he's with Ilya, his body can't lie. His body is showing him that this is what he wants, that he wants this kind of like loving touch, this like very intimate, romantic kind of connection. And again, Ilya responds to that by matching the intensity, right? He doesn't pull away, he leans into it, right? And so it becomes a very hot and heavy scene that starts off, you know, very kind of gentle and like romantic. It becomes hot and heavy very quickly. And it leads to Ilya saying Shane's first name, which has never happened before, right? And that is kind of like this like proof of like how intimate this has become. And so what they do that, Shane says Ilya says Shane's name, and then Shane says Ilya's name, right? And then there's kind of this moment of post-nut clarity, if you will. I saw a meme that was like, post-nut clarity, but it's me realizing I'm in love with you. Like, that's exactly what happens with Shane, right? He has the post-nut clarity where he's suddenly like, okay, what just happened was not casual sex. This is me. I'm in love with you. Like, that's, I think, what is catching up to him now. Again, his body couldn't lie. His body was showing the desire to be engaged in this like loving way, but his brain was not caught up. And now that he has the post-nut clarity, now that the moment has ended, his brain is coming back online. Remember how I said that it's kind of like he has these two different parts of him almost, where it's like when he's fully in the moment, he's fully in his body, he's connected to what he wants, but it's like his rational brain is like not online. And then it clicks back on afterwards. And then that's when he freaks out because he is discovering something about himself now. Oh my God, I'm in love with you. I don't have time to process this. What does this mean? What does this mean for like, you know, like, first of all, this probably means I'm fully gay. Oh shit, what does that mean? You know, and I think for Shane, like being gay, I'm not the first person who said this, but someone else said like being gay for him is like synonymous with being in love with Ilya. Like, it's kind of like the same thing, because for him, like, when he realizes he's in love with Ilya, that means that like this isn't just like a sexual preference, you know, this isn't just like a curious exploration. This is like a life that he would want to live with another man, you know, and that is very threatening to, again, his career, to how his family might perceive him, how his teammates might perceive him. So he's fearing that rejection based on this new information that he's now receiving about himself, that he's in love with Ilya. And that's why he is then the one who freaks out and leaves at that moment. And yeah, I kind of love how they both like have those moments, because it's like it kind of all equals out in the end, but you know, it's a very push-pull dynamic. And then the last thing I just kind of wanted to talk about is like how I guess that kind of like concludes in the ending of the season. So in episode 5, which actually an interesting thing to note is that we don't visually get any intimacy scenes in episode 5. It's implied that they are having sex, but we don't get to see it as the viewer, because the episode is focused more on the emotional content. This is when they actually start talking to each other. Thank fucking God, right? Because prior to this point, again, all of the communication has kind of happened through the sex itself. Now they're finally talking. And we have the beautiful scene of Ilya confessing his love to Shane on the phone in Russian, and Shane doesn't understand him, but he can kind of like feel the energy of what he's saying. And the end of episode 5 is what I want to talk about, because how that leads into episode 6. So Ilya, again, with his like attachment fears, we know in episode 5 that he's aware that he's in love with Shane. So he knows that he loves Shane, but again, because of his fears and what he's learned about love, is that he doesn't think that love can be enough. He doesn't think it's enough that he loves Shane, that Shane might even feel the same way about him, because it doesn't matter. Because if that were true, he wouldn't be able to go back to Russia. If he came out as a queer man, he wouldn't be able to go back to Russia where his family is. And so he would lose everything, and then all of his attachment would be placed on one person, which would be Shane. And then what happens if Shane then rejects him and leaves him one day? So it's very threatening for Ilya to believe that love can be enough, right? And he doesn't believe that it can be enough until he sees proof. And the proof that he sees is actually the example that's set by Scott and Kip, right? Because Ilya doesn't think that there's a way in which, you know, they can come out in the hockey world and be accepted. You know, Ilya's afraid that he would be, like, deported, essentially. And when he sees Scott and Kip on TV, it starts to show him that maybe there could be a way forward. And I think also the fact that by that point he had kind of resolved to not go back to Russia after his father dies. You know, he's kind of like cutting his losses. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but you know what I mean? Like he's realizing, you know, where his existing connections stand, which is basically Svetlana and Shane. And I think prior to seeing that moment with Scott and Kip, he doesn't really see a way forward with Shane. And then once he does, that's when he's like, okay, I'm coming to the cottage, you know? And so then we finally get episode 6, where we finally see them start to get on the same page with each other. We have the beautiful, you know, I have this problem scene. So we still have this kind of dynamic of Ilya needing to kind of push Shane into the moment of vulnerability first. But then what I love is that Ilya is the one who says, I love you first, you know? I think that's really beautiful too, because it's like, it's a moment when he's finally able to, like, say the thing that he's feeling without having to go about it in a roundabout way like he has been doing this whole time. So I think that scene is really beautiful, and it's like they're finally able to just be real, to be present with each other, because we've seen this, like, build up, which again has been, like, communicated through the sex of them just feeling something but not knowing how to communicate it, only knowing how to communicate it with their bodies and not their words. Okay, so I almost just ended the video there, but I was watching it back and I felt like I needed to say one more thing, which is tying this all back to my original thesis, which is like why this is for the perverts and the artists, and like it's not one or the other. And the effect that I think, the reason it's having the effect that it's having is because not only is it like a good story with like really strong emotional beats and excellent acting, but the fact that the story, so much of the relationship and the story is being told through the sex, is very compelling. One, it's just interesting, right? It's just something that you don't really see a lot of. You don't really see a lot of sex being used as communication in storytelling. And that's what sex is. I mean, all human behavior can be seen as a form of communication, right? But like in storytelling especially, like that can be one of its primary purposes. But I feel like we don't really have very many examples of media that like does that very intentionally the way that this show does. I also think the fact that it is queer is prominent. I think we're like hungry for this kind of story. Like it's been like, I don't know, I feel like for me, if this show had been as popular as it is now when I was in high school, I would have, my mind would have like been blown. I would have been like transported to a completely different universe. Like that would have been life-changing for me, you know? So I think it is really having its moment now. I think the zeitgeist is like hungry for queer stories to really be in the limelight. And I think the sex appeal of it is not separate from the emotional impact. I think, yeah, it might be the thing that draws people in. But like even the people who, you know, who are watching because they enjoy the sex, the reason that they're enjoying the sex, the reason that the sex is hot, the reason that it's compelling, the reason that it feels so electrifying and charged is because of the emotional dynamics that are underneath it. And I think we can like subconsciously and intuitively project ourselves onto the character. So if like you have a history of repressing your desire, you're identifying with Shane. If you, you know, have a kind of secret, unspoken longing to really be sincere and intimate, but that's not how you present yourself in everyday life, I might identify with Ilya. And so you're projecting yourselves onto these characters. And so when they get to have those moments of catharsis through sex, you as the viewer are experiencing it vicariously. And the fact that the sex scenes are shown, you know, the way that they are, the fact that you are not, it's not just fading to black, but you're seeing the act, you're seeing their facial expressions, you're seeing them like immersed in the moment. That's what's giving you as the viewer the catharsis, the vicarious catharsis of the intimacy that you're longing for. I think that this show is popular because we're all starved for intimacy, and it's showing it to us in a way that's very like different than a lot of things that I think have been on TV before. You know, it's showing it to us in the form of sex that is representative of a deeper emotional intimacy that is going on between these characters. It's very fascinating. So I just wanted to add that in there because again, I think the sex is why it's so emotional. Like, it's not separate from it. It's not like, oh yeah, there's sex scenes, but really it's about the emotion and the romance and the characters. It's like, well, yeah, but the sex is how that happens. So anyway, that's my like soapbox about that. So that's kind of, I feel like, the end of what I wanted to say. I hope that was interesting for you. This video is probably way too long. I don't even know if I'm gonna edit it. We'll see. But let me know if you want more of this. I could talk about the show for days probably. So if there's anything else you would like my thoughts on, if there's like, I don't know, specific episodes I could go through, let me know. If you would just be more interested in content of me, you know, analyzing various media that I'm obsessed with, let me know. And yeah, thank you for watching. See you later.